So Stu, how's your week been so far?
Connor, it's been a pretty good week so far. We've had another great person start here at Hampton North, which would be the highlight, except for the fact that someone recognized me and referred to me as a podcast host this week for the very first time. So we're
Are you
taking moral
serious? That's
victories.
amazing.
Someone says, you're that guy off said podcast, which normally I'm that guy off of LinkedIn. So to be that guy off of a podcast is a big win for me. How about you? I imagine you haven't seen such highs this week.
Well, you just made my day knowing that what we're doing, someone's actually paying attention to. That's fantastic.
That's it.
Actually, weirdly enough, I got a similar compliment on Tuesday. Now you mentioned it, was talking with someone and they're like, so my role at Sysdig, I was talking with our head of sales and we were having a conversation. He's like, he's building out his team. And one of the things he mentioned was, he said, we now have this excellent candidate in pipeline. And the reason they're interested about Sysdig is they saw the clips from Zero Signal on LinkedIn and they're like, oh, that's interesting. And then they went and followed the trail and then landed there. So yeah, so it's kind
We're
of a good
making a
week for us.
difference, Connor. We're making an impact.
Yeah, well,
Look at us.
making a
Look
difference
at-
is one
well,
thing. I hope
look
we're
at
making an
us.
impact.
What's the Paul Rudd thing? Look at us. That's it.
Okay, yeah, look at us. Well, the good news is everyone tonight doesn't have to look at us exclusively. We've got a really exciting guest, and I was really excited, Stu, when you said we got to get this guy on the podcast. So without further ado, I want to bring in what is our very first guest in our weekly sessions to come into today's podcast. So without further ado, let me introduce you all to Jason. Today, we're joined by Jason. Jason's a longtime incident responder, a former CISO, and he's helped organizations navigate some of the trickiest breaches over the past decade. So he's uniquely positioned to talk about the intersection of incident response, AI security, and strategy in the modern era that we're in right now. So dude, Jason, we're super excited to have you. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And congrats on being called out as a podcaster. You guys, you're legit now.
Yes, I'm
My
hoping
parents
to
be so proud, right? That's when I grew up, that 3-year-old in the playground, I wanted to be a podcaster. So I finally hit that dream.
Instead of a teddy bear, you had a podcast mic.
That is it. That is it. Ever since I was young, carrying it around with me, and I knew one day it would come good. So I appreciate that kudos, and exciting week for both of us.
I love
Because
it. I'm glad I could join you guys here on the journey.
Because when you think about Northern England, that's what comes to mind. It's influencers, right?
The home of the podcast. That is it.
That's it. All right. Well, Jason, thanks for joining us tonight. I wanted to get you on for today's conversation because we've got a couple of major topics we wanted to bring to today's episode, starting with the work that DeepMind has put out. So with that, let me just tee it up for you guys, and then I want to get both your perspectives on what you on this. And for the audience here, I don't think I quite did you justice in the introduction here, because what you're doing with Evoke specifically is in this space. So maybe before we dive into this, do you want to give us just 2 sentences on because you've dedicated your career to this path now. So tell us a little bit more about Evoke.
Yeah. So, I spent my career kind of at the bleeding edge of where attacks are going with Mandiant, doing investigations and nation state threats before anyone knew what it was. And, with Crypsis Group, I was riding the ransomware wave from when it went from a single system encryption to enterprise. And so I just see the risks of AI going in a similar direction where we're going to see a new type of attack, new type of impact. And so what we're focused on at Evoke is securing agentic systems. And while that includes part of the model, what we're really focused on is how are companies deploying AI in their environment and really trying to tackle the problem from that angle versus starting from the model inside out.
That makes sense. So let's dive into this topic then. So I wanted to get your perspectives and yours too on what DeepMind put out this week. So DeepMind, for those of you who aren't into this, they are basically the powerhouse, the AI powerhouse inside of Google, inside of Alphabet. So every time we engage with Gemini or any other AI powered product, it's really coming from the DeepMind team. So they have recently updated their frontier safety framework, and they've really sharpened how they're evaluating the AI models and deployments. So the key thing here is they've expanded the risk domains when they refined their critical capability level, and they've built a more rigorous early warning systems in this to catch dangerous behaviors. And they've actually introduced a new critical capability level into their risk modeling. And this is around where we start to see their AI is they're looking for AI starting to get manipulative, not persuasive, but specifically manipulative. And I think this is really interesting that they are paying attention to the AI enough to say, we recognize this is an emergent problem where the AI has enough context, enough knowledge of our biases and our own fragilities that this system might start to turn on humans and start to manipulate them in ways that we can't see unless you're looking for it. So this came out. So friend, we'll put links to this in the show notes. But again, it's kind of all over the place. But DeepMind has officially updated their frontier. And if anyone who hasn't read the actual white paper beneath it, they really should go read that. So let me turn over to you, Jason. I want to get your perspective on this as we jumped into that. Let's talk about this from two angles. Let's talk about from like the risk angle. Like, what do you think DeepMind is seeing, and then we'll get to the enterprise piece as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because we started to see some of these reports. I think from Anthropic was one of the early ones to start reporting on this, that you have these models trying to kind of hide the ball on what they're trying to accomplish strictly to try to stay on goal, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's the thing that always stood out to me is that you have a new technology that is so hyper fixated on accomplishing their goal that they are willing to manipulate, the human users of this to accomplish that. It's almost like taking like the highest type A person that you can imagine and having them just go ham on trying to get to a goal. Like this is kind of what we're dealing with. And so it makes sense because by design, that's what these models are trying to do. They have a goal. They're trying to accomplish that no matter what. I think that the risk that we have here is what happens when it starts to slip away from our control, and we're none the wiser about it either. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting kind of development there. I'm glad to see that they're starting to test for this. I always thought it was a little bit weird that we had these higher level categories of the biological, cyber was part of that.
Mhm.
It's nice now to see that we've got some sort of manipulation checks in here too, to see like, is what we're interacting with being truthful for us, right? Because that's going to be a big component of us in gaining trust and using these systems moving forward.
So let's talk about that because I want to get to your point on this as well, because I mean, you're hiring into this space for a lot of people as they're trying to build their security and safety teams for this as well. So, but on the enterprises, as CISOs who are adopting this technology, where does this problem? Is it realistically right now just a frontier problem, or should we, as security leaders, should be talking to our governance committees about this risk and how we're handling it? So, Jason, you want to take that first, and then Stu?
Yeah. So I believe that this is more of a frontier problem first and foremost, right? Where it's going to apply to you as a company is, are you building models yourself where this is going to be a significant issue, right? Are there companies that fall into that category? Yes, absolutely. Is that a mainstream problem? No. Right. Most of the companies that I'm chatting with and I'm seeing building technologies, they're still relying on the frontier models. And so I kind of look at this as shared security model still for the vast majority of people that are building with tech with this type of tech. And so let the frontier labs spearhead this to really get their arms around it and try to control that the best they can. And for any other company, for every other CISO that is dealing with their organization, experimenting and building with this, it's the layered approach. Frontier Lab, let them try to manage this from a safety perspective. And then from an engineering and security perspective, how can you build in some control gates here so that, assume worst case scenario, it's not going to go rogue in your environment, or you're not going to find yourself in a position where, suddenly your systems are making decisions and you have no idea why. And then you're stuck in more of the regulatory issue area where you can't tell why the system made the choice and you don't have the evidence to support it either way.
I have some interesting. So I think to some extent I agree, and in a perfect world, I do think this should sit with the model builders, right? But I think in the shorter to immediate term, my viewpoint is: can you fully trust one of the great model builders entirely in your environment as a CISO? I'm not so sure, right? And I think the long and the short of it is, if it's an Anthropic, OpenAI, DeepMind model that you're using that as a project and it screws up your entire security environment, it's gonna the blame is gonna sit with the CISO, right? Then you're not gonna be able to sit there as a CISO with your counsel and say, hey, like, let's go talk to the guys over at OpenAI. You're gonna find yourself on the street. So I think it's there's probably a blended approach, which I think you kind of attested to, Jason, which is, I think long term, the amount of resource that these companies are able to throw at this problem, I think in the medium term are going to be the people that do take control of this. And they're going to have to, right? Because I still think, I've talked to you both individually about this actually, that a watershed moment of some sort is going to speed up the safety of these frontier models. I think right now we're talking very theoretically about what might actually happen. I still feel fairly comfortable that something pretty bad is going to happen that will accelerate the protection of this in that short term, where if I'm a CISO, I know that I'm still responsible for this from within my own environment. And I'm probably, whilst I'd love the outside help, I'm making sure that I'm hiring around that. I'm hiring folks to, build the right environments for my team to be able to use these models. I'm hiring people to have responsible AI policies, etc., and trying to find that happy medium where long term I can, rely on the people that are responsible for my models, but short term that lies with me as the CISO.
Well, God help the S&P 500 when that event happens, because we are hyper priced for perfection right now.
Yes.
Well, I actually I
Why would
do
my kids
wonder
want to
like
go? Oh,
Yeah.
I do wonder, like, are we already starting to see some of this, right? So you have the issues of just these models started, or LLM apps in particular, starting to give really bad therapy advice and
Mm.
yes.
starting to really impact the mental health of teenagers, right? So, like, I think we have a crack there. And then you also have it where, Anthropic released their Intel report back in August showing that you have threat actors in the wild using their model to go and automate and augment a full ransomware attack, right? And so I would argue like we're probably already at the border of where things start to get bad. And then, Stu, like, to your point, like I think when you start to see this at a larger scale, that's when people are going to really start to pay attention. I think the challenge right now is that you've got the safety aspects, which are really should be more focused right now on some of the psychological issues that are starting to pop up. And then you got the security implications as well. But it's all tied into these frontier labs really trying to get their arms around what's going on with these models and how do we try to get them into a safe and secure state.
So if we've all been here in this industry for a minute, but it's like, think how long it took for just cybersecurity generally to be adopted as like a important risk area in the business, right? Or the enterprise, or from a national infrastructure perspective. It could be a while. We could,
Wait, it's been adopted? Are we there yet?
it's adopting, it's in flow.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
So the one thing I wanted to highlight here, my point there was just that we to both your guys' points, like we're starting to see the emergence of it like cracking, and there might be a watershed moment. We might have more than one. We might have one. Like you can go back to my career, you go back to Target, like that was like the big breach, right? And like that kind of really shake things off. But Target stock went bloop and came right back up and everything. And so it took again 10 years for us, or 15 years, how long it's been, to really get to a place where now, we're the biggest financial services companies in the world want to talk and have their boards pay attention to this. But anyway, I digress. I just wanted to highlight on this topic here. If anyone hasn't read this, it's actually a pretty good read and really good primer on how Google and specifically DeepMind is thinking about this. To your point, Jason, they talk about specifically this one, like this is the risk here, and this is the CB as like the chemical, biological, something, and nuclear like risks that you have there. And then they talk about like the critical capability level, and then what they're doing about it. And then just because I love to geek out on the nuances here, when they see these security levels here for everyone who's watching, that's coming from RAND. RAND has basically what I believe to be the gold standard for like setting your objectives on a security program when you're protecting weights and models. And then so basically they're saying here we see the risk and here's the investment in security goals that we're putting in place to offset that risk. So
I
actually,
also,
Jason, yeah.
I was going to say, I also expect to see the word safety used a heck of a lot more than the word security as we start to talk about models, because I think we are at the point where I think they invoke different emotions, and safety is one that I think speaks to humans more. And I think when we look at some of the kind of psychological harm that we seem to be seeing, and I think we're going to talk about a little bit here, the word safety, I don't know, it feels to me security has almost become watered down because of what I do on a daily basis. But safety, my mind goes to the locks on my front door, how I feel, how my family
Yes.
feel, and I think we'll see that word utilized more often in general dialogue than safety. I'm not sure what else to take from that, but I do think that's going to be a word that is thrown around more than security.
So I'll give you a thought on that. I was at RSA this past year. Kind of who's who of AI researchers was present. And a gentleman made the comment, and it was, if you're going to build a car, when you have $100 put into this car, how much of those $100 do you put into securing the car versus making the car safe? And he's like, you might put $10 into securing the car, you could put $90 into making the car safe. And I think that's going to be, and the language I've seen and I kind of always anchor to is like, security means that the AI system is free of a threat actor. Safety means it is operating consistently within the boundaries and expectations and goals that you've set for it. And then reliability is it able to be present under an adversarial or adverse circumstances? So that's where I say, and so I think right now, to your point, Stu, there's a lot of people who are in the middle there saying, like, how do we make sure people aren't committing suicide after having a conversation with ChatGPT or with our frontal model?
And I think this is the important distinction, because the way that you implement the tech in your organization is going to dictate where your concern should be. Because I would argue that the majority of companies don't need to be as concerned with the safety aspects, because it's more of a security issue of, is somebody going to be able to get access to our data? Is somebody going to be able to execute a tool that they shouldn't be? That's less on the safety side, outside of the, hey, is this doing the things that we're asking it to do? And more on the, are we putting in the right defenses, and do we have the right visibility to see when this thing is going off the rails? And so that's where I think that actually the AI safety, I think, is one of the more important things for society. For an organization, the security aspect is going to outweigh the safety in most organizations. And it's going to come down to, like, how are you implementing it? Is it for critical business decisions? Because once you start doing this for, like, say, HR systems, now we have to deal with bias. We have to deal with some of these other issues to make sure that it's not going in a way that is not unfair to anyone in the decision-making process.
Yeah. And then you have like Colorado state laws coming out specifically talking about that item. Right. So actually, that's a really good point, Jason. You're right. This is like, obviously, like, how do we adopt the technology inside the context of the business, the context of the adoption, the context of where we are in the stack is going to be really important. And if we're kind of rolling our own, that also becomes a problem too. So, if people are saying, hey, I'm going to grab DeepSeek and I'm going to bring that in, I'm going to run that in my environment. It's a very different risk profile than saying I'm going to use Gemini and pull that in and run your business system.
Well, as we talk about hiring and bias, I think we've got a really good segue here, Connor, and we're getting a little better at this. But a really good segue into the Expel report that you shared earlier.
Yes, let's go there. Expel is one of those organizations that I just like love to love. Like, I just love that. Like, I'm always in their corner. I've used them at multiple organizations. I love working with the team there. I love what Greg has done, the CISO there. It's an amazing team. So let's talk about this talent. So recently they put out the talent gap, or excuse me, they put out a report on the talent index, as they're calling it. And so in the 2025 talent index, they made it pretty clear that security jobs are designed, they're currently not attracting the level of talent that they could be. So what the Expel team did is they went and they analyzed 5,000 postings, and they realized that only 8% of them offered remote work, and 4% of them were mentioning equity, and 10% acknowledged burnout, which is a really small number because burnout is it's a huge problem for many people in the cybersecurity industry, and particularly for those who might be in SOCs or doing any kind of like work that they feel is repetitive or they're really stressed out about. I've seen statistics that the average SOC analyst spends 20% of their day trying to figure out what to do. Like, the prioritization, 20% of the day is just prioritizing because they're constantly inundated with alerts coming through. And they also observed that when you compared it to adjacent roles like observability, like, which is a flavor of like SRE and such, they actually, security analysts are being paid less than those observability. So we have this narrative and this belief inside cybersecurity around the talent shortage, but maybe part of this, and maybe a huge part of this, is now around the equity inside the roles. So not my domain, so I'm going to hand over to you guys. Stu, what do you think here? Well, let's talk about like what makes for really successful for people what's a successful setup, and then of course what's a poor setup when you're trying to attract talent here.
So I'm gonna start with a slightly different topic, and then I will answer your questions. But I think the first thing is, if we're comparing getting the right type of talent, right, which is the best minds, right, where are they probably going right now? they're probably going to go and work in AI because right now that is the hottest market. But I think if you look back historically, like this is a very new phenomenon, but if you go to MIT or Stanford or Georgia Tech, like candidly, like who are those great minds idolizing? They're looking at Zuckerberg's, Bill Gates, like I'm generalizing here, but like I don't know that any of the folks there are idolizing John McAfee. Do you know what I mean? I mean, look, I'd probably idolize John McAfee. The guy lived a heck of a
Depends
life,
how wild your life is. Yeah.
but at least maybe in my 20s, I don't know if I could hang that way anymore. But I don't know if it's ever been the coolest job, right? And I think as an industry, I'm not necessarily sure that we've actually welcomed that with open arms, right? Like I think, first of all, I don't know that there is a talent shortage from a cybersecurity perspective. And I want to quash that. I think there was. I now think it's almost, we maybe also then oversubscribed with some BS boot camps. And, there's plenty of people that thought, hey, I can make a buck, so I'm in cybersecurity. I actually think that if money is your ultimate end goal, there are a million other industries that you should be in that are not cybersecurity. You have to love the game because this is like one of the most frustrating, irritating jobs, and you never get to be the hero. And I think some people don't realize that that's actually a thing. Even when you become the biggest job, you rarely, if ever, maybe you distinguish one incident in your entire life, but you never get to release a new product. You never get to crush sales quota. You never get to deploy a finance program that saves the business hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that's the general ethos. And then look, what do I think makes a great person? And then we can talk through like the hiring strategy and the policy. What I think makes a great person is someone who realizes that the goalpost is never, ever, ever going to be in the same place in this dumb industry. Like it's absurd to think that you actually know anything because by the time you've learned something, the game has moved on. And if you don't move on with it, then look, you might be good for 5 years, but the likelihood is if you are not developing and reinventing yourself candidly every 18 to 24 months, you get left behind. And I look at the great minds of our industry that have worked for some of the best programs, and is their ability to be novel and be creative and not run the playbook every single time because the playbook gets ripped up every few weeks. They're the people who do great. And they're the people who are, when the market slows down, they're the people who continue to get blown up for great jobs. I've completely gone off the track of what your original question was, but I hope that was a useful answer in terms of how I think we're addressing the situation.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because when I look at the kind of ideal candidates, you said like there's no heroes in security. And what's interesting, I never thought about it in that sense, and I think you're right. But I also think that so many people get into security because there's a little bit of a hero's complex there, right? And part of that is you have it where I see a lot of security professionals who are very mission driven, right? And there's probably some weird parallel to kind of a hero's complex in there, but they want to protect, they like the technical challenge. But to your point, like there are very few incidents or very few situations where like you get to celebrate as a security team. It tends to be a little bit of a thankless job. And so a lot of it is like the curiosity has to drive you. I think it's a lot of internal motivators has to be there in order for you to be successful. And I will say in the IR world, we celebrated a lot when we found the attackers and kicked them out, but at the cost of basically every other life luxury there. Like you didn't have a life, you're traveling all the time, you're working 80 to 100 hours a week. Like it's hard to celebrate after you do that for a little bit of time. And so, yeah, I think just overall, like one, when you're finding kind of the right candidate, like the things that I typically look for, and I'm a little bit nervous to share this because I feel like Stu's going to come in here and give me a good education, which I actually really want. But like when I'm looking at somebody, I'm looking at, do you have the curiosity, right? Because to the point, like everything is changing. I can't rely on somebody that is going to rely on the information that they learned in their last gig. Like that's just, you have to hire for potential in almost every security role because you need that person to grow. So curiosity and the self-motivation, like I can't be dragging you along on the journey at any point in your career, right? And so like you have to be able to be a self-driver and really move things forward. And part of this is for me, like I try to implement in all my teams freedom within a framework. because I want to build a team that they know what the goal is. It's called commander's intent, right? It's like, go take that hill, figure out how to take that. I'm not going to micromanage that. I'll have some opinions, but at the end of the day, like, I need you to figure out how to do this and get us there, get us the win, and then we're going to choose the next hill from there. And so that's just a very particular type of person that's able to really do that. But I think in cybersecurity, like, that's kind of the makeup that you need to be successful.
I completely agree with that. So, Stu, let us know if we're wrong here, Stu. But like, I think when building my teams, those have been similar to the characteristics I've been looking for. So recently, in a role that I had as a CISO, the company was going through a massive transformation. We had multiple divisions. One of these divisions was building software that was going to be used by the U.S. government to relocate 325,000 service members every year. And as we went through this, those incredibly tight timeframes to achieve things, and anyone who's built a security program where you're going to be audited by a federal agency realizes the amount of rigor that goes through. So at one point, we came into this as a security team. We had to rebuild IT, we had to rebuild infrastructure, we had to rebuild security team to achieve this mission. And the team looked at me and like somebody said, it's not fair. And I was like, thank you for saying that, because everyone else was feeling it. And he said, it's kind of that's the culture we create. It's like, you can say what you want to feel. But then I said, that's okay. It doesn't have to be fair. You said it perfectly, Jason. I totally agree with that idea of the commander's intent. It's like, this is what the business needs. They need a FedRAMP moderate boundary, and they need it now. And we need to rebuild infrastructure in GovCloud. Like, go. And it's like, that's it. We just got to go achieve that. And we have to go achieve. And it's like, that, but that's the language that we had. It's like, we have this intention, and so you need what you described as curiosity, perseverance, and these are all of the things that are just like an ability to grind. Like, that's it. None of these things are like fun.
No.
And to your point, Stu, like, none of these things are exciting. And like, we hit the quota and we did the thing and we sold the thing. It's like, no, this is just like quietly, often like with lots of friction in the middle across the organization, trying to make these transformations. And yeah, it's a difficult task.
Yeah, and I think that's why you find, historically, a lot of these people come from a military background. Is that kind of service, right? Like, willing to work for the greater cause. And I think in security, you have to have that kind of mindset of like, understanding that I am part of something bigger, and maybe my name won't go up in lights, but knowing that me as the quiet janitor, the quiet steward of moving things forwards, and being okay with that. Some people are, some people aren't. And I think as a leader, you have a responsibility to learn how to drive that and make sure that team members, because you've both sat in the CISO seat, right? It's not fair. Like, it's just not fair. And a lot of stuff falls down on you folks as security leaders, but you still need to make your team feel like the heroes, even if they don't get that adoration anywhere else. So that's another challenge into of itself.
Yeah, it goes down to like the culture that you build. And so like you might not get high fives from the business, but you certainly get it from your teammates, right? So I would bet in Connor's case, right, he's got a case of Liquid Death that he can hand out to his teammates there as the celebratory drink, since he's such a big fan.
One day when Liquid Death sponsor us, he won't even have to pay for those.
I look forward to that day every day. Let me actually, you guys jogged a thought here, and before we move on to our next topic, which is, did you guys see Phil Venables, CISO at Google? He put out another one of his blog articles, his blog posts.
Blog articles.
The interwebs have spoken. We are here are the blog articles. So he put out and he did this recent one called Good CISO, Bad CISO. And is what you were talking about earlier, Jason, about that commander's intent, like really owning it. And what I wanted to handle was just highlight here is, if anyone hasn't read this, it's really worth reading. It's just like, this is what it means to build a really good culture. This is what it means to demonstrate great behaviors as a CISO. And I was looking I had it for a second and I think I lost it. Anyway, we'll come back to it. But it was just this idea that we own it as a security team. Whatever your outcomes are, whatever you need to navigate, we're not here to just put in tools. There it is. Good CISOs are business executives who manage technology risk. They are the CEO of the security program. They take full responsibility of the organization's resiliency and manage themselves in the terms of business outcomes. And that is coming from a guy who's atop his game. I have all the respect in the world for him. And it's like, that's what you're talking about. So that when you said that commander's intent, it just brought that back to mind.
We're really crushing the segues. The one thing as a parent of young kids, the way that's structured in my head, it reads like a kid's book. I don't know if you kind of read it in the same way in your head, but it's like, good CISOs are this, bad CISOs are this. But look, it's
That's because that's basically the reading level of Moses.
that's it. I mean, look, it's also, that's one up on me. People assume I can't read. But yeah, Phil is great, and that's an incredible article. And candidly, good for some folks when you're doing your own end of year self review. If you are doing that, go and score yourself. Like, go and see where
Well, that's a good idea.
where you stack yourself against the good CISO stuff and the bad CISO stuff. And, even if you don't have somebody doing a formal CISO review, some folks have coaches, some folks have executives who are adept at this. If you don't have a leader that's adept to coach you as a CISO, go and do it yourself. Compare yourself against that framework. See how you get on.
I think the accountability is huge. And I'm not going to make many friends with this statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that we as CISOs, former CISO for me, is that we fall into this trap where like we think that the reporting structure is the most important thing. Like if I had one more conversation around whether like a CISO should report to CEO or whoever, I was going to lose my mind. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Your job is to own security. And yes, it's not fair because you don't always have control, almost never have control over the things you have to fix. But that's the role of the CISO. Like you have to influence throughout the business. And guess what? That's every other business leader in any organization. They also have to influence. Just because you're a CEO as well, yeah, you might be able to bark orders down, but guess what? Like that's going to get old real quick and your team's going to revolt. The whole game of life is around influence. And so we have to like get out of this trap of, well, like I can't do anything because I didn't get the budget, or I can't do anything because I don't report to the CEO, or I can't do anything because I don't report to the board. Like, I don't care. Find a way. Like that's literally your job, is to navigate the nuances of your organization and find a way to try to piecemeal this thing together and reduce the risk. You're not going to get to zero. Nobody ever does. But your goal is to try to get this down to zero, focus on the right things, prioritize, and try to get the business into a good spot where they can run that business without some catastrophic failure just staring them every single day.
So, Jason, I want to get your point of view on this because I very much agree with the direction you're taking that. So, when people have asked me, like, what is the job of the CISO? And what I really focus, my answer looks something like this. Our job is to discover, price, and coach. We're to discover the risks the business is carrying. We're to price it in the terms that the business makes sense for them. And then we're to coach the heads of the business units or the heads of the product or the heads of responsibility. Say, this is where we think, is how we think you should be mitigating those, so on and so forth. Like that's the job. Or as it was once put to me by Andy Ellis, who was like the CISO at Akamai and other places, he would say like, you be a credible witness to the risk. So they have to believe who you are. And when you bring data, you bring the data and they believe that what you say things that matters. And then you can you create your investment thesis around how you're going to reduce that risk. And then when you're given resources, you become an excellent steward of them and you just go after that. But like that's how I usually frame the role of the CISO. I wanted to get your take on that. Like, where's it falling short, or how could it be more clearly communicated?
Yeah, I really like that. And it should be a t-shirt, right? Because it breaks it down into kind of the core
I heard
principle.
merch. Did anybody else just hear merch?
Set up the store. I'll be the first buyer.
There you go.
So I think first and foremost, it's really somebody who can understand like what are the risks to this particular business, right? And so like I built this kind of framework, which is nothing special. I think a lot of people do this, right? But it's let's look at the threats that are out there. Let's understand what the most likely ones are to hit my business. Let's look at the tech stack and compare that. If I had a cloud native environment, right? I was much less concerned about a lot of the on-premise issues, especially like in some of the backup and recovery type things. Like I was able to play a different game than most because of that environment, but I had to look at the threats differently. For me, right off the bat, identity was the most important thing because that was the front door into our environment, right? And so that to me is like that first part of like identify the risks, right? That is the job of the CISO. Set the strategy, find the most cost-effective way to do that. Right. And this isn't about go buy every tool under the sun. This isn't about I need 15 extra headcount to do this. Like find a cost appropriate strategy that fits within the business's budget and then execute and hold people accountable. And that gets tricky, right? Because you can hold your own team accountable, but you also do have to figure out a way to hold the rest of the business accountable through influence, right? because you're not going to like, it's not going to go on, the engineering lead's report card that, hey, like you didn't listen to the CISO because nobody cares, right? But how do you build a relationship to say, hey, head of engineering or head of IT, this is why this is important. This is why we need to pay attention to this. And it's influencing there to really hold people accountable indirectly, right? And that is not an easy skill. And so I think that's part of the job of that CISO as well, is to really be there to influence the outcomes that you're looking for. And I like that idea of the credible witness too. Like, you got to be able to call balls and strikes. And at the end of the day, the business is going to accept a lot of risks you don't agree with, but your job is to get in there and just give them a soft landing for the inevitable things that might happen.
And a great tool for anyone who's listening to this and following Jason's advice here, if you're stepping into a security leadership role, that soft landing can look like this: a folder called Memo to File. And every time you're in a spot where you make a decision that could be looked back on and someone could question it, you just write down contemporaneous notes. Here's the information we had. Here are the decisions we made. Here was in the room we made that decision. Write it to file. And what you're doing is you're not throwing people under the bus. You're showing up as an executive to prevent it going out of control when litigation happens, because it does. And so you just create those, and then maybe you never need to use them, and that's great. But if you ever do need to look back on them, you have given your defense team an arsenal to come and protect the business with. So at the end of the day, we're here to protect the business in the good times and prepare for the bad times.
Which is to protect yourself. Just to clear up those TLEVs, that bad times could be protect yourself. Look, I know that there's always a lot of concerns for CISOs. What do you think the top, like, I think we all know what the top concern for any CISO is in 2025 is, which is securing AI agents. Let's talk about that from a survey perspective. I think that's a recent study, right, Connor?
So let me share that on screen here. So there's a really cool article that I think everyone, or a blog article as we're calling them now, that people should read. And this thing called Weekend Bite. Jason, have you heard of this?
I may know something about this publication. Yes, this blog article. That's right.
So you wrote this a while ago, and I really liked it. And you were starting to talk through how as CISO's top 25 and this year's the top concerns are securing these AI agents. And the conversations I'm having with CISOs tend to come down one of two tracks, and they're usually doing both. And this is the dual mandate. Most CISOs have to help the company rebuild into an AI first technology stack while they're rebuilding the security operations and the security workloads into that. And agents are now the principal expression of AI. That's where we are in this life cycle. But Jason, why don't you tee us up for a little bit here? What are you hearing when you talk to CISOs? You spend every day in this area. I would love to hear more from you on this.
Yeah. And so I want to take you back on the journey of the conversations I've had, because it's been a lot of twists and turns and things I didn't expect. Even just, say 4 to 5 months ago, a lot of CISOs weren't ready to have a conversation on this. Yeah, I can remember early on, I had a conversation with a CISO and he was like, yeah, I'm not really concerned about this. Their reasoning, which sound by some justifications, was, hey, like, I don't have any of this connected to the internet. Not a big deal, right? And for most companies, even right now, I would say, yeah, it's probably a low risk. You're looking at like some data loss, right? It really is going to depend on what you've hooked this thing up to and what those risks are going to be. But what was really interesting to me was the engineers were freaked out. Like, they were more concerned about the security implications than security leadership. And this was really perplexing me for a while. But what I realized over time was the engineers were more concerned because they actually knew the technology. And so we had this knowledge gap where a lot of security leaders and just security teams in general didn't understand the technology. They weren't playing around with it yet. And so they were lagging behind in understanding the risks because they just didn't know what they were. And so, some people just completely would stick their head in the sand. Some would take a draconian approach where it was like, we're going to block everything until we can figure this out. But I think we're getting to the point now where a lot of CISOs are like, okay, I can actually see what the business is doing now and see some of the experiments they're doing. And I'm getting smarter on what some of these risks are. And so now they're starting to formulate a more comprehensive plan. Now, for anyone that's listening, the way that I look at the risks on agentic security or agentic systems right now, I kind of bucket it in two different areas. Some of this goes back to our safety versus security discussion before. I look at it as you have rogue actions. This is just the agent going off and doing its own thing, no external manipulation. It's just trying to accomplish its goal, but it's doing some weird things, right? And so this could be hey, I'm going to go execute this tool and I'm going to do something that might seem a little bit risky, but hey, I think I need to do this to actually accomplish it. So, perfect example here is the Replit scenario. So, for anyone that hasn't heard of it, this was Replit coding platform, a vibe coding coding platform. Somebody was creating a new SaaS app, and the agent deleted the production database because it was trying to troubleshoot something, right? No malicious intent. It just made a mistake, but it deleted the production database. And we will put aside all of the poor design choices that Replit had on, only basically letting these agents.
How honest was the system when asked if it deleted the database?
It was honest. It fessed up to it and it acknowledged that it made a mistake. But what was interesting was during this whole process, the agent was making up data for what it was trying to do as well. That it hid until it was explicitly asked, right? And so this goes into I'm not going to say it was outright manipulation, but it was just it's like the kid who's
It
not
was
going to admit he
embarrassed,
stole a
Jason.
cookie
It was
unless asked,
embarrassed.
right?
Yeah.
So
it was an embarrassed agent. That was all.
there you go. Exactly. So it's just like you have the rogue agents, you could call it misalignment, that sort of thing. So that's kind of scenario one that you have to kind of monitor for. And then you have what I'm more concerned about is the malicious actor that is going down the prompt injection path, right? Trying to manipulate the system to do whatever they want, whether that's stealing data, whether that is executing tools. And I think we're going to get to this point in the future where you have businesses that have created these systems in a way that they're running business critical functions. And now we're looking at business interruption, whether from a rogue agent or from a malicious actor. And so I'm looking at this as this could be our new type of ransomware in agentic systems that we have to think about from a business interruption standpoint.
I couldn't agree with more than that last part there around the business interruption, because if you go back to those 3 pillars of trust, where you have security, safety, and reliability, this part here, like business continuity, is about to get really hot. It's going to become cool again. And we're going to have to do business impact analysis. We're going to have to start documenting processes. We're going to have to realize, okay, what are the systems that we have in place here? What are the permission sets they have? What's the blast radius that these agents could take if they make a mistake? And all kind of the work that used to happen when we did like design, where the industry invested more in architecture and systems design thinking and those kind of things. And that kind of like went away for a while. I think it's going to come back and be pretty hot. That's my prediction.
What's old is new again.
That is true. So one of the things I just wanted to circle back there is like, just for everyone who's listening here, when we think about agentic systems, these are probabilistic agents. It means they're not deterministic. We don't know exactly what they're going to do. Okay, that's fine. But they have a permission set, and you can change them. You can also coach them. So I'm working on a paper right now, which is like on the coding side. You can think about security awareness training for your coding agents, right? So if you look at Claude has a markdown file like the Claude MD. You can put rules in there saying, hey, this is what a SQL injection looks like. Don't give me code that's going to give that. Or this is what cross-site scripting looks like. Don't give me that. So we need to start thinking about these truly as you have these bespoke intelligences that do need to be trained in the context of security. They need that context as they go along. So this idea that agents are software, we kind of have to put that to a side a little bit and hold that in suspense when we think about actually there's an intelligence here. And a lot of the ways we used to train the human around security awareness training, so that's going to come back into the conversation as well, which is a fascinating twist on this whole universe.
Well, and this is the thing that's crazy to me is that for the longest time, we've always said that the human is the weakest link in security. And now I'm looking at agents and they're the dumbest things ever. Highly intelligent, but no common sense. And like, they're just, somebody referred to it before, and I love this, is like, they're just like the happy puppy that they just want to do whatever they can to please you. And so I look at this as humans are actually going to be better at detecting social engineering than these LLMs. And so like, we have to really be careful of where we're going to trust these things, because at the end of the day, like, they are going to try to do what you tell them. And that's the difficult part with prompt injection, is like, somebody can just insert some malicious instructions and it's just not there yet where these agents and these LLMs are going to be smart enough to detect like, hey, somebody's trying to trick me to do something I shouldn't be doing.
All right, guys. So with that, I want to introduce a brand new segment into the show. Jason, with you being here, I think it's a good time to introduce this. And this is going to be something actionable for the security leaders who are listening to this today. What would you say if you had to give CISOs a They've listened to this over the weekend. They're coming in on Monday. They're coming in with some energy and a cup of coffee. What are you recommending for them? We'll go around the horn here. It can be around frontier safety. It can be about talent design, agent security, even leadership, as we talked about. What's your advice?
Number one thing is lean into the business and understand what they are trying to do with AI. This is a situation where you have to understand what they're building towards, what their objectives are, and not the place of no, it's a place of how can we try to do this securely and almost behind the scenes to make sure that we can get these agents out there or whatever agentic workflows, whatever you're building. But it starts with understanding what the business is experimenting with and being there as a support system to do that in a secure fashion. But it all starts with the conversations and the discovery to see what is happening in the business, because it is happening, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So it's better for you to be there at the table with that conversation and part of that discussion to help shape the future of what it looks like.
Stu, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I think to echo that sentiment, I think this is the first time that security leaders actually get to be the hero and get to be the cool kid, right? If we can deploy these agents successfully and safely, and we're not stifling innovation, we're not being one of those draconian security leaders that say, cut this thing out, like we're not going to do this. I think it is the first time ever from a security leader perspective that you get to be in the cool kids club. And it actually becomes, goes back on our point earlier that this is an opportunity where maybe being a security leader, you get to lift the trophy at the end of the, a sales kickoff or whenever it may be. So I think lean into that and be on the side of the business and again, be close so that you can deploy. And then my other would be to buy Liquid Death and share it with your team. I stole yours because that was about to be yours. Connor, what's your advice for a Monday CISO coffee?
Read the white papers. Go a step lower than the articles and the blogs and the LinkedIn. And when you see the link back to an archive paper and it's 16, 17 pages long, read it. When you want to understand what Gemini is doing from a frontier security perspective, go read the 16-page PDF attached to it and go read it. There's a lot of value here. Everything is changing really quickly. And so there's a lot of value in just anchoring to source documents and just go and read it instead of reading people's interpretation of the article. That would be my encouragement.
Do you like to read physically? Do you still print things off to read them for documents like that?
Very rarely. When we went to Black Hat to do our recordings, I got an iPad.
Yeah.
And so I've been like leveraging that format a little better, but usually I'm just trying to hide from my 5-year-old and just read
for what it's worth. I actually take it like if I really need to read something that's more than like 3 pages long, I've got into a habit of printing it off because you get so used to your devices, your phone, your tablet, or whatever. It's so easy to just zoom over stuff and scroll stuff. If I really need to be like, okay, like if I look at like running my business and end of year performance reviews and things like that, like just the habit of cup of coffee, physical paper, even sometimes taking notes, like taking myself back to school, just wondering like from a white paper perspective, printing it off, like for me, definitely helps me take information.
That actually makes a lot of sense, too. That makes a lot of sense because you're just getting old. That's what's happening here.
That is it. When I light my candles at night.
So.
All right. Well, guys, so with that, we'll wrap there. So Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Jason is the former CISO for Corvus Insurance. He was the co-founder of Evoke Security, and he cut his teeth at Mandiant, where he investigated some of the most complex breaches in the world. And today, he's on a mission with Evoke to help organizations to secure the next wave of AI and agentic systems by turning policy into practical, real-world strategy. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Jason.